we play a game?
Why, yes, I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Live from Little Rock, it's Shane Plays Radio, Geek Talk Radio, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for listening. Feels good to be back on the air. Took last week off for basically holiday weekend, even though the 4th of July was Tuesday. I normally don't do that. It's actually pretty rare that I just completely take a week off and just replay a show. I think maybe that's the second time in the history of the show over 2 years. But we replayed the show with the Society for Creative Anachronism, SCA, which was a lot of fun. Of course, the show before that was with Berger Becky Heineman talking about Dragon Wars and all that good stuff. Today, oh my goodness, today I got Chris Avellone back on the show. I think this is his third time on. I love having Chris on because, one, he's a fun guest, but two, people love anytime he comes on, and I get a lot of interest and activity above and beyond the normal interest and activity when he's on the show. So I'm glad to have you back on. We're going to be talking about Pathfinder Kingmaker, which has a lot of interest in it for a computer role-playing game for multiple reasons. We'll get to introducing Chris here in a moment. First, going to go through our housekeeping notes. This is Live Talk Radio. I'm glad to have you. Thanks for listening in, whether you're listening live in the Central Arkansas, Little Rock area on 96.5 FM The Answer, or listening on the stream at 96.5fmtheanswer.com, or if you're listening delayed by podcast or on Krypton Radio. I'm really glad to have you. This show does go out as a podcast a couple of days after the live show. I'm going to try to get this one out really quick because there's a Kickstarter associated with Pathfinder Kingmaker, I think, that ends on Tuesday night. So I'll try to get the podcast version of this out even sooner than possible to help the Kickstarter. Chris comes on because he's a nice guy, but, it doesn't also hurt to promote the game that he's involved with. So I definitely want to help him to do that. Now, the show notes for today's show are at shaneplays.com. That's ShanePlays.com. And you can also tweet me at shaneplays. That's ShanePlays. And you can call me. This is Live Talk Radio at 501-823-0965. But do check out the show notes at shaneplays.com because that has our news items linked. And it's also got the information on Chris and Pathfinder Kingmaker and all that cool stuff. Regarding the podcast, it goes on the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, other fine podcast directories. And we're now on SoundCloud. So look for Shane Plays on SoundCloud if that's like how you like to get your podcasts. I'm up to like episode 88 on SoundCloud. There's 105 something episodes of the show total, so we're pretty close to getting caught up and just putting the newest show up each week. Last but never least, Shane Plays is carried on Krypton Radio. KryptonRadio.com is SciFi for your Wi-Fi. Now, after all that blabbing, Chris Avellone, how the heck are you, man?
I am doing well, Shane, and thank you so much for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, you're a fun guy. So if you lived here in Little Rock, I'd probably try to blackmail you into being a co-host or something. So
I'd love to do that. That'd be great. Yeah.
So anyway, hey Zach, can we turn up his sound just a smidge? I think he's pretty good, but I just want to get him up a little bit more. I also want to, Chris, I want to throw some love on a sponsor, and then we'll get back to talking about what you're up to. I do want to welcome new sponsor, Arkansas RPG Con. In October, we're going to have a day of nothing but tabletop RPG goodness, and I've partnered up. I'm helping promote them. They're helping promote Shane Plays, and it's going to be a great day. Carl Heil is helping run that, and it'll be in Benton in October. So listen to that for that ad. I think we're running it in the first break, right, Zach? Does that say? Yeah, Zach's giving me the thumbs up. So listen to that ad. All right. So Chris, we're going to talk today about Pathfinder Kingmaker. But before we do that, I have an incredibly brief news segment. I only have 2 news items just to help warm us up and get us yakking. But I did want to introduce you again quickly for people who, strangely enough, I don't know anybody who would listening to be this or who would be listening to the show who probably doesn't know who you are, but it's possible. So you are a veteran of the games industry, both tabletop and computer role-playing games mainly, but you've also, done stuff like the System Shock remake or remaster and some other stuff. So it's not just exclusively computer role-playing games, but you've also been associated with some of the most well-known and well-regarded games in the computer role-playing genre, including Planescape Torment and others. So if, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, that's pretty much the range. And calling me a veteran is a very kind way to put the fact that I'm very, very old.
No, yeah, you're young, man. You've still got centuries of game design left in you, right?
Well, if that cyber technology works, then I should be able to last that long. That would be good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if we ever hit the singularity or whatever it is that's out there. Okay, so we will get back to talking more about Pathfinder Kingmaker here in a second. But first, I want to, Zach, can you turn on the super secret microphone in the newsroom and see if they're working today? Wow, there they go. Working hard on a Saturday. That's some hard working news folks right there. Remember, everybody, for every $1 of Patreon support that the show receives, the news, get this, Chris, the news team receives a penny an hour raise. I mean, wow, okay. That's a win-win right there. I mean, come on, right? Wow. That is a win-win. Okay, but in all seriousness, here's today's news. I curated these for you, Chris. All right. I thought that I thought you might enjoy commenting on these. The first one, we're not going to spend a lot of time on these because there's a lot of interest in Pathfinder Kingmaker. So we're really not going to spend a lot of time on these. But I want to tease people, and if they want to know more, they can go find the news items online, or they can go to shaneplays.com to the show notes and check it out themselves. But did you happen to see, I'm sure you're familiar with Ian World, right? Morris is one of the larger tabletop RPG news sites. If you're not, he's the same guy that does the Innies, right? Yeah. Okay. So they usually do some pretty good news items, but he put some numbers together, and he posted a thing on July 6th on Thursday at Ian World, and it said, "How big's the RPG market?" And now we're talking about tabletop RPG market, not computer role-playing games. Okay. So he's looking at the hobby games market, and that includes, collectible card games, board games, miniature games, dice games, all that. And they're saying that the total market for that, according to an organization, ICV2, okay, evidently they put this kind of stuff together. And the total market, I'm going to ask you to make two different guesses here, Chris. If you throw all that together, miniatures, board games, card game, including like Magic the Gathering, all that, tabletop role-playing games, I guess Warhammer, all of that, you put it all together, what do you think the total U.S. and Canadian market is?
The U.S. and Canadian market?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow, Shane, I actually would not even be able to hazard a guess.
You're not going to hazard a guess? Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to cower it out.
Okay, no problem. That's an option in the dialogue tree. So I'll allow that. Okay, the total market, according to ICV2, is $1.19 billion.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's a great number.
Do you think that's higher than maybe you would have guessed?
I was worried it was much, much less than that.
Okay. Well, now that's where we're getting to now. I think this will surprise a lot of people. Out of that, would you like to hazard a guess at what the tabletop RPG market portion of that is? I think this will surprise a lot of people.
I'd probably say 30% of that number, or 20%, just because card games seem so popular.
Yeah, they really are. Here's the shocker. You ready?
Shoot.
2.9% or 35 million tabletop.
No way.
Yeah, that's freaking everybody out. because, on social media, people are really debating on this. So that goes to show you when and I've talked to a lot of friendly local game store owners about this. They always try to support tabletop role-playing games out of love for the hobby and because, it has a passionate fan base, but it's not that big of portion of the market, right? And then also, people, and this puts a new perspective to me on, like, if basically right now, if you go out and you play D&D and you buy the player's handbook, the monster manual, and the game master guide, or the dungeon master's guide, that's $150. You're like, wow, that's really steep, but that's a one-time sale. And then that's it. You have all that and you really don't need to buy anything else. Where a lot of these other games, like the Warhammer or the Magic or the Pokemon, you're constantly HeroClix, you're constantly reinvesting or buying a new board game or whatever. So, I hear a lot. In fact, we have sponsored Game Goblins. We did a free RPG day event all day long, 14 RPG games a couple of weeks ago at their store. And the owner was like, man, I want to do that because I want to support the hobby, but that's usually not a big moneymaker for me, but we're going to do it anyway. So we found ways to encourage people to spend money. But is that not surprising?
That is incredibly surprising.
Yeah.
Well, to be honest, I used to have like a really bad Magic addiction, and it's very true about the amount of sales that you'll get from those cards, because our group at work back at Interplay, we would have like Wednesday night like Magic the Gathering competitions, and we would spend so much money just trying to get those specific cards to round out our decks. And it was definitely a very expensive passion.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I remember in the early 90s, it was like 93, something like that, when the unlimited version of Magic came out. And we were playing, we were like anteing with like Mox Pearls, Black Lotus. So we didn't know.
Yep.
We were, okay, sure. So anyway, all right. Like I said, I don't want to spend too much time on that. If people want to know more, go to shaneplays.com, and that news article is linked there. And then also, you can go to EN World or just search for an article that literally the name of the article is how big's the RPG market, and it breaks down all of the other portions of the market. And then it says, for comparison, the global film industry market was $38.3 billion. So I love stuff like that, right? I just love looking at all that kind of stuff. So, all right, here's the second news item, and we will make this a quick one. Now, before I mention this news item, Chris Avellone in no way whatsoever is associated with Fallout 4. Okay? Chris Avellone has done Fallout. I should have mentioned that at the beginning of the show. You were involved with Fallout 1, Fallout 2, and then Fallout New Vegas, right? Is that not correct?
Almost. Yeah, I was not involved with Fallout 1, but Fallout 2, a canceled Fallout 3, Van Buren, a little bit of Fallout Tactics 2, and then Fallout New Vegas. Okay.
So I'm throwing this out there because it's a Fallout related news item, but Chris Avellone is not associated with Fallout 4. All right. I just want to get his response to this. Did you see this article about Dion, the singer Dion, is suing Fallout, I guess Bethesda or whatever, for Fallout 4 over using the Wanderer song in quote unquote repugnant ads? Did you see this?
No. Oh my God.
Yes. Singer Dion, I guess, who did the Wanderer, right? See if you can find that online. See if you can find a clip from the Wanderer by Dion, Zach. I should have asked you to do that before the show. Singer Dion says his tune was used in ads that feature repeated homicides in a dark dystopian landscape where violence is glorified as sport. And he's suing for singer-songwriter Dion DiMucci. I'm assuming I'm saying his last name right. Has filed suit against ZeniMax Media over the use of his classic song "The Wanderer" in ads for the video game. And so here's the thing. And if this is courtesy of the wrap.com, and then people can go to show notes, or they can go, just search for Fallout 4 Dion Wanderer. You'll find it. But I guess there was an initial agreement, but he said that the songwriter, the singer said, I want to have, final approval. And so that even though there was an initial agreement, that final approval never happened, and they just did the ads. Yep. And now he's upset that, the song will now maybe be associated with that kind of imagery. So obviously he's never heard of irony or people being able to understand that that song is being used in an ironic manner, right? But I guess it's his right, legally or whatever, to go after that. But I would say if I was singer-songwriter Dion, me personally, I'd probably be really happy there's a whole lot of people hearing my song that never heard it before. Right? But,
I will say those final approvals, though, there's been so many situations in the industry where, if someone puts that in the contract, there's usually a very specific reason. It's like they like to be careful with their stuff. And the fact people have to put that in there, it's just sort of like this testifies to the fact that sometimes marketing can kind of jump the gun because
right.
it's so eager to get something out. And you really have to cross your T's and dot your I's because it'll come back and bite you.
And again, we're not lawyers. We're not speaking to the merit of this case. I just think that's a fascinating headline,
Yep.
that, because, one of the earmarks, now people could complain about that. They can have their own opinion about what Bethesda has done with the Fallout series. But one of the things they've done is they have really cool music. As you're running around, you can tune into these different radio stations and all that. Mm-hmm. And, they've exposed people to music that maybe would not have heard that music before. But anyway, I don't want to spend much more time on that. Do you have any incredibly wise quips on that news item before we move on, Chris?
Nothing wise, but I will say that setting up the radio stations for New Vegas and for the DLC content, setting up individual stations that had different tracks and themes and ambience, that was a lot of fun to do in a game. And one thing I like about working with Bethesda is they actually gave us an opportunity to do that. So it's pretty awesome.
Well, now was Fallout New Vegas the first one to do that?
I'm not exactly sure. I don't think so.
Okay.
But I have to do some research on that. I'm not exactly sure.
Now, did you personally get to pick out any of the music that was in New Vegas?
Not for the core game, but for the DLC packs, we tried to divide up the music depending on what the feel of each DLC was, and that was a lot of fun to do. I think we even did like an actual individual song for one of the DLCs that ended up showing up on the radio stations later on too, which was also a lot of fun to do.
Oh, that's cool. So, is there? And you may not even remember. I know for us, we're like hanging on every word of these games, but for you, you're like, man, that was years ago, and I've worked on 80 other projects since then. But do you remember any individual songs that you wanted in there that made it?
That unfortunately, I'd have to dig back through the dusty library shelves of my memory. But no, unfortunately, not one really jumps to mind. Just I recall enjoying the process very much.
That's really neat. Okay, cool. Well, let's move on from that. I want to talk about Kingmaker, Pathfinder Kingmaker, which is really exciting. What I want to do, we got a break coming up. So what I want to do is ask a couple of Chris Avellone questions in general. And then after the break, we'll swan dive into Pathfinder Kingmaker, which is a Kickstarter you're working on right now. And it's also the first single player computer role-playing game experience for the well-known and much beloved Pathfinder role-playing game, which for a while was outselling D&D. So there's a lot of people out there that are passionate about Pathfinder. I did want to ask, I have to know, Chris, this is vitally important. How is Kreia, and have you talked with her recently?
She's still a crotchety old woman with lots of things to say and critique about your behavior, but she seems to be doing well. It's good. She still has her opinions about the Force, but when talking with her, you're able to have a conversation with her and discuss the points. At least she's open to discussion. I got you. So, is she still upset about the hand? Probably. Yeah, you know what? She doesn't really get tied down to things like that. She's like, it's just a hand. Yeah. As long as, Jedi and Sith. See, the Jedi got it right. Don't have attachments. Exactly. Yeah. So, all right. Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that Kreia is still with us. So, all right. Are there any projects or cool stuff you were doing you'd like to talk about that are not Pathfinder Kingmaker related, but that you would like to mention or brag on or anything like that before we get into that? Actually, yeah, I'm working with the developers at FTL, their Subset Games. They're doing a brand new game called Into the Breach, where you play as a giant mech, and then use your mech to smash giant bugs that are emerging from the earth. and it's a very much a rogue-like procedural game like FTL, but it plays a lot like murder chess.
Wow.
And it
Okay.
is a lot of fun to work on. I much kudos to those guys. I loved FTL, and I think Into the Breach is just going to be another game that's as fun as FTL. So I'm really happy to be working on that.
FTL is the game that I love to hate, right? Because it's so hard, but it's so fun, right? It's like it's that final boss battle comes, and no matter how much you think you prepared, he the boss will own me every time. But it's a great game. It's a lot of fun. If people,
it was rough for me. Like I got to that end boss, and I didn't have any of the teleporters.
Yeah.
And there's sections of that ship that are sealed off, and I'm like, damn it.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was a pretty humiliating boss battle for me.
All right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But it's a great game. Now, do you happen to know, is Into the Breach going to have that same great sort of retro art aesthetic? Because that was one of the things I really liked about FTL.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, Justin Moff, who's one of the two primary developers, his art style is definitely, it feels a lot like FTL visually when you look at it.
Oh, great. So any idea when we will be going into the Breach?
Actually, I don't believe a date has been set yet. I think that, one nice thing about Subset is FTL did so well that they can take their time and do it right. They don't actually want to actually set a date until they feel really good about the game. That's another thing I respect about them.
Okay. Now, are you doing scenario design, or, I mean, what is because you usually have more of a role or a writing or narrative role in games.
Yeah, actually with this, they contacted me to help set up the lore for the world, a lot of the individual factions and corporations, and how narratively the mechanics for that would work. They also wanted me to write the dialogue or like little barks that the pilots do like during battle, mission acts, and all sorts of stuff like that. So it's been kind of the whole range of stuff, but it's not as actually dialogue intensive as FTL, so it's actually not too it's not too overwhelming.
All right, so I'm going to put that on my list. Murder Chess by Chris Avellone. Got it. All right. I'm going to add it to my wish list. Okay, last question, and you don't even have to address this one if you don't. And before I ask this, I am not 2020. I'm not looking for deep investigative reporting or but I want to give you the opportunity to answer if you want to. So it's basically been about 2 years since you went free agent, as I would put it. Right, when you kind of left being with one company, and you've been kind of out there working on a lot of different projects, kind of on a freelance basis, as far as I understand. I just want to ask you, has that been kind of what you hoped it would be? Is any regrets, any surprisingly cool stuff you didn't expect, or anything you want to comment on? And if you don't even want to comment on it, feel free to not. So. No,
actually, it was surprising in that it was way beyond what I expected. I think I've worked on more titles freelance-wise in a variety of different ways than I ever have being employed by a company full-time. That's been amazing. I think I've actually done more titles freelancing than I've done across my entire career working, for those two companies, Interplay and Obsidian. It's been crazy in that respect, and just the range of stuff I've been able to do has been wonderful. So yeah, it's been far surpassed my expectations.
Okay, so you haven't been waking up in the fetal position going, "What have I done?"
I do wake up in the fetal position if I actually am struggling with an issue with one of the games where I'm like, God, how do I solve this? But then I'm able to jump over to another game, get the creative juices flowing. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I know how to solve this. And I'll jump back and detach myself from the fetal position.
Nice. And of course, you've become the stretch goal that walks like a man. So
true. Actually, you know what? In all future crowdsourcing, I have asked to never be a stretch goal.
Not to be a stretch goal. Can I just be part of the game and not be a stretch goal?
That is exactly it. And the Night Dive guys with the System Shock 1 reboot, they were very to come and they're like, we get it, and we'll just make sure people know you're part of the game, but no stretch goal. I'm like, thank you, Night Dive. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, great. Okay. Well, Chris, we're going to cut to a break. When we get back, I've already got a couple of questions that have come in on Twitter about for you. One of them you probably know is Philippe, Pepe from the CRPG book project, and I've also got a comment from Jonas Arganeras from Argentina. So he's listening right now live from Argentina. We're going to cut to a break. When we come back, we're going to have more with Chris Avellone on Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio. We're going to be talking about Pathfinder Kingmaker.
Comic book lovers, visit thewildstars.com today. From the mind of author and comic book industry expert Michael Tierney, it's not just a comic book, it's a comic book novel. The Wild Stars is sci-fi and so much more. Learn the explanations behind UFOs and space gods. This isn't the Twilight Zone. This is the region of the Milky Way galaxy known as the Wild Stars. We guarantee you've never read anything like it. The complete comic book novel took 20 years to tell, with one reviewer noting, the story of the Wild Stars stretches ambitiously across space and time, from small-town murders to the destruction of planets, with every event given multiple layers of meaning. If you haven't read The Wild Stars, you're missing out. Visit thewildstars.com today. The die is cast. Plunge into worlds of fantastic adventure where dragons lie and the undead stalk the shades of your mind's imagines. Where creatures of legend plunder wealth through the horror of their passage. Monsters grim and foul hold the ecstasy of gold and the renown of glory. All this and more awaits you and your friends in the unlimited, fantastic world of the Castles and Crusades role-playing game from Trollord Games. Visit your friendly local game store or Trollord.com to get your copy today. A rules-light, adaptable game that has stood the test of time. 12 years in constant publication with no new additions, Castles and Crusades is the original, easy-to-play attribute check system. Join us and unleash your imagination. Visit your friendly local game store or Trollord.com to get your copy of Castles and Crusades today. Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/Shane Plays.
Hey, and we're back on Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Remember, this is live. If you're listening to it on Saturday around 1 o'clock in the Little Rock area, this is live Geek Talk Radio. You can call in at 501-823-0965, or you can tweet me at Shane Plays, ShanePlays. If you're listening on RPG Codex, just post in the Pathfinder Kingmaker Kickstarter thread, and I'll try to keep an eye on that and ask stuff too. And then I've got on the phone right now, always happy to have him on the show, is Chris Avellone, veteran game designer, well known for many titles, including Fallout 2, Fallout New Vegas, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, The Sith Lords, and now he's working on the first Pathfinder computer role-playing game, which is a pretty big deal because there's a lot of people that play Pathfinder, which we'll talk more about here in a second about what Pathfinder is. So again, Chris, thanks for joining.
Hey,
yeah,
thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, glad to have you here. And then I've got a couple of, I got a comment and a question on Twitter, and then we'll move into some stuff that I was wanting to ask you. Now, before I get into these, what's happened is there's a company named Owlcat Games that has, I guess, worked with Paizo, which is the company that publishes Pathfinder, to get the rights to publish a first person, or not a first person, but a single player Pathfinder computer role-playing game, which is going to be a computer role-playing game based on the Pathfinder tabletop role-playing game. Now, the reason this is a big deal is because there's been work and discussion and this and that on an MMO version, I think, of Pathfinder. And I think there's a Pathfinder card game out there that's a computer version. But this is the first single-player role-playing game for Pathfinder. So you take that, you got a lot of people excited about that. Then you add in Chris Avellone, and people get even more excited. So this is why this is a big deal. Now, is there anything you wanted to comment on that, Chris, before I get to these Twitter comments?
You know, it's been a surprise to me. It's taken this long to actually get a single player Pathfinder.
I second that. I'm actually really surprised by that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the CEO, Lisa Stevens. And, I would talk to her like once every few months and go, hey, I think there might be an opportunity like with this developer, but to finally have something shake out has been fantastic. And,
right.
I've been a big lover for Pathfinder for a while, and being able to see this realized has been fantastic.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, based on what I've seen, the screenshots, the video, the commentary from yourself and Owlcat Games and interviews, I think it looks very promising. The only thing that I personally would change, and if wishes are fishes, I'm not saying that, and I'm not even trying to go into a debate here, because I know this is one of the oldest debates in computer RPG history. I'd prefer turn-based with real-time with pause, or over real-time with pause, but that's neither here nor there. Everything else I've seen, I'm like, that's cool. And I don't even know, like, from your perspective as the narrative designer, I don't even know if that choice on turn-based versus real-time with pause was even in your hands or not. So I'm not trying to go down that direction. If you wanted to comment on it, you could, but like I said, I'm not trying to be 2020 here. There's a lot of positive stuff here that I think people are going to be really excited about. It's based on a really well-known and famous in Pathfinder, you have adventure paths, right? Which most other games you would call a campaign, but Pathfinder does these adventure paths that there's 6 interconnected modules that take you over basically a campaign level experience. And evidently, now that I'm not familiar with Kingmaker, but people seem to be crazy about Kingmaker. Like, a lot of people love it, and this is going to be a computer version of it. So, hopefully we'll have some time to comment on that here in a second. Now, I do have I have a comment and a question here for you, Chris. One, Jonas Argañeras from Argentina, he just wanted to tell you, he said, Kingmaker will make a lot of Argentinian RPG players happy. So,
well, good.
Yeah,
I heard that.
Yeah. So, I want to say that. And then, Philippe, Pepe from the Computer RPG project, RPG book project, and he does, let me back that, the CRPG book project, which is online. You can go look for it now. I believe you've contributed to that, haven't you, Chris?
Yeah, actually, I think I did the Wasteland 1 breakdown in that book. And the amount of work he's put into that is insane. He's commended for that.
And Philippe's been on the show a couple of times. I enjoy Philippe. Last time he came on, he was in Japan, and we had Skype problems, so he was furiously typing questions at me, and I was reading, or comments, and I was reading them on air and sort of being his proxy. He got up at 4:00 in the morning to be on the show with me and Matt Barton. So
wow,
yeah,
Matt Barton, cool.
Yeah, Matt Barton. We went down the CRPG of the year list from RPG Codex, and we went through that because Philippe helps put that together. So, but anyway, okay. So, Philippe says, question for MCA, and if people don't know, that's RPG Codex slang for the master, Chris Avellone.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Did he experience any, and this is in quotes, cultural shock from working with Russian devs? He says their games tend to be more hardcore, for example. And just if people want, Owlcat Games is a Russian game dev studio. So,
yeah, actually, there was some culture shock, but in a good way. He's absolutely right. The amount of depth they go into with the customization of the character, statistic-wise, not just visual, and then also the mechanics for things even you would take for granted, like camping or resting. They like adding a lot of systems to those, but I welcome that. And I think that makes the experience richer the more you can sort of tweak things like that. And I kind of like how deep they dive into those systems.
Yeah, well, they seemed the pitch video, which was 8 minutes long. I was like, 8-minute long pitch video, but then I ended up watching the whole thing, and it was really interesting. They seem pretty hardcore on Pathfinder. Like, they seem crazy about Pathfinder.
Not only that, they have some hardcore kingdom decisions, too. Like, their creative director, Alexander, he was like, so of course, like, you have the range of, like, alignment options and Kingmaker, you could be good or evil. But Alexander, like, extended that to the kingdom mechanics, too. And I was kind of curious, like, well, how evil can you be? Because, like, sometimes games kind of wuss out with that.
Right.
But no, not with him.
So you could be straight up evil.
Oh, and not only that, he's like, in your kingdom and you're evil, I mean, you don't even have to have citizens. You can just kill everybody and raise them from the dead.
Yeah, I saw
and
that.
I was like, holy crap, Alexander,
Yeah.
you insane.
Yeah, he's like...
He said it so matter-of-factly.
Yeah, exactly. It's in the video. He goes, yeah, if they won't do what you want, just kill them and raise them from the dead. And then you can use them however you want. Like, wow, dude. So, yeah, that's pretty crazy. Now, okay, so this game not only is based on Pathfinder, and I'm going to spend just real quick on this. Feel free to pitch in any further comments on it you want, Chris. Pathfinder, some people refer to it as D&D 3.75. Let me explain why I'm saying that. D&D around version 3, I think 3.5, they came out with the open gaming license, which lets you take basically the game engine and the mechanics and some of the stuff that wasn't like unique IP, like the Forgotten Realms, for example. And then you could publish games using that with your own lore and this and that and the other. And Paizo ran with that and built a whole company and gaming world and gaming system forking off of D&D 3.5. And they've refined it and refined it and refined it and refined it. And for a while, now D&D, from what I understand, has reclaimed this crown with 5th edition, which has been very popular. But for a while, Pathfinder, which is a fantasy role-playing game, was outselling D&D for a while. It's very popular.
Yep.
But the mechanics, if you've played D&D 3rd edition or 3.5, it's basically a very refined version of D&D 3.5. So that's why some people refer to it as D&D 3.75. Okay? Does that sound fair to you, Chris?
That sounds accurate.
Okay. So I have to be honest. I have never played Pathfinder. I've watched it played. I've watched, video sessions of it being played. There's some guys out of Australia called the Dice Stormers. In fact, there's this guy, Ben, who does the Sirenscape product where you get sounds and stuff for your RPG games. They're crazy about Pathfinder. So I've watched them play it. But I've never played it myself, but I have played a lot of D&D 3 and 3.5. But I know there are a lot of people that are crazy about Pathfinder because they love the world that has been built by Paizo, right? So now, have you played? I think I've seen you in interviews. I mean, you may have even mentioned on the show earlier. Have you played much Pathfinder, Chris? I know you played some, right?
Yeah, we played. It was sort of an unusual campaign though, because it wasn't the campaign I was involved with wasn't actually sort of a dungeon crawling experience. It was a campaign being run by one of my programmer friends, Anthony Davis. And the premise of the campaign was we were all, an Ocean's 11 style team where we go and try and pull these heists. And we didn't do a terribly good job at it, but we had a lot of fun doing it. So that was kind of a fun experience.
Yeah, if everything goes south, it doesn't matter as long as you have a good time on the way down. So
yeah, absolutely.
In role-playing games.
It makes for a better story.
Yeah, and better memories, to be quite honest. Remember that time that, yeah! So, okay, so I got to ask you. I'm going to ask you this, and then, after this, we'll have to cut to a break and come back. But, okay, is this, given that the engine, it's not the Infinity engine from Baldur's Gate. I'm not saying that. But it's a similar isometric experience with, real-time of pause, this and that and the other. Does this feel to you like working on like a Baldur's Gate game or a D&D game, or do you feel like this is a uniquely different experience, even though there are some similarities?
It has some similarities at first glance. I will say, while working on it, though, I think just the nature of the Kingmaker adventure path and some of the things that are happening with the companions and the antagonists, it feels different, just narrative mechanics wise. But it does have some similarities at a glance, absolutely. And I think that there are things that people that played the old Baldur's Gate games will absolutely enjoy about it. But there's a lot more going on in terms of systems and narrative than I think I ever drew an association with the Baldur's Gate. So I think that it's going to be interesting from that perspective.
Could you give us an example of maybe one of those differences or something that, kind of goes beyond?
Yeah, Without getting into any spoilers, the amount of interactions that you have with the antagonists and the way, including the primary antagonist, and there's many different types of them.
Right.
The amount of influence you have over those paths is making the project really interesting for me, because I feel like you're much more engaged with your quote-unquote adversary than I have experienced in other games that I've worked on.
Now, does this include... I was reading an article, I think, on Beemit, BEMIT. It's kind of a Reddit kind of thing. I'm not real super familiar with it, but they were doing a interesting people interview series, and the guy or the gal, I can't remember who it was, interviewed you, and they asked you about a specific example, and you went, "Oh yeah, I guess that cat's out of the bag," and you were talking about how where you can talk two people, like two enemies, into fighting each other. Is that kind of what you're referring to? That kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, well, that's just a minor example. Yeah, okay. One of the lead narrative designer at Owlcat, he's also named Alexander. There's a lot of Alexanders there. He had set up this scenario, and I'm happy to talk about it now since I quite stupidly came out and said it. He had set up a sequence where you can you're sort of in a situation where these bad guys are going at it with each other, and it's pretty clear that their alliance is kind of uneasy.
Right.
So then you can start playing around with their heads and playing psychological games where you can provoke them into turning on each other, just through the word choice and the conversation that you have set up. And I loved it. I thought that the way that the player could sort of pull the dialogue trickery was really well done. So yeah, that's one example.
Nice. Okay. Well, I got to get us to a break. When we come back, I want to ask you a little bit about the alignment system, because I was going through the updates. I want to ask you one about the alignment system, and then also I saw that the budget contributed to level design on the Kickstarter page, and I wanted to ask you about that. But anyway, I've got to get us to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about alignment a little bit about like what your role is in the game, and ask you, because this budget surprised me, and I was like, oh, am I reading that right? So anyway, I just want to get a chance to clarify that. But when we come back, first I'm going to throw some love at a sponsor. We'll cut to a break. We'll come back with more with MCA, the master, Chris Avellone, right here on Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio. Don't cut to a break yet, Zach. I gotta give some love to a sponsor here. Some goblins are your friends. Game Goblins is Central Arkansas's premier retailer of Magic the Gathering, Warhammer 40K, board games, card games, RPGs, miniatures, and hobby accessories. Call Game Goblins at 501-224-GAME or visit them online at gamegoblins.com. That's 501-224-GAME or gamegoblins.com. They're conveniently located at 1121 South Bowman, right on the corner of Bowman and Canis in West Little Rock. Staffed by super friendly employees. There's plenty of play space, and there's events like every night of the week for all of your gaming needs. And remember, they just gave us a whole day a couple of weeks ago for free RPG Day. So get over there and check them out. But I heartily recommend Game Goblins. Make sure to check out their customer loyalty program that rewards you based on your actual purchases. Game Goblins earns your business and keeps it. First-time customers mention Shane Plays and receive $10 off your purchase of $50 or more. Tell them Shane Plays sent you.
Comic book lovers, visit thewildstars.com today. From the mind of author and comic book industry expert Michael Tierney, it's not just a comic book, it's a comic book novel. The Wild Stars is sci-fi and so much more. Learn the explanations behind UFOs and space gods. This isn't the Twilight Zone. This is the region of the Milky Way galaxy known as the Wild Stars. We guarantee you've never read anything like it. The complete comic book novel took 20 years to tell, with one reviewer noting, the story of the Wild Stars stretches ambitiously across space and time, from small-town murders to the destruction of planets, with every event given multiple layers of meaning. If you haven't read The Wild Stars, you're missing out. Visit thewildstars.com today.
The die is cast.
Plunge into worlds of fantastic adventure where dragons lie and the undead stalk the shades of your mind's imagines. Where creatures of legend plunder wealth through the horror of their passage. Monsters grim and foul hold the ecstasy of gold and the renown of glory. All this and more awaits you and your friends in the unlimited, fantastic world of the Castles and Crusades role-playing game from Troll Games. Visit your friendly local game store or trolllord.com to get your copy today. A rules-light, adaptable game that has stood the test of time. 12 years in constant publication with no new additions, Castles and Crusades is the original, easy-to-play attribute check system. Join us and unleash your imagination. Visit your friendly local game store or trolllord.com to get your copy of Castles and Crusades today. Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/Shane Plays.
Hey, welcome back to Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. We're joined by veteran game developer, narrative designer, author. I think did some comic book writing. He's just done a lot of stuff, a lot of cool stuff in his career so far. Chris Avellone, and we're talking specifically about his involvement with Pathfinder Kingmaker, which is the first single-player Pathfinder based computer RPG. So, Chris has been regaling us with all kinds of cool info before the break. And I said after the break, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about alignment. And then I had a question about the budget allocation I saw on the Kickstarter. I want to mention, folks, today is July 8th. The Kickstarter for this ends at 11 p.m. Central on July 11th. So, if you're listening live now, you got a couple of days to get in on this. And then I'm going to try to get the podcast version out as quickly as possible to give people a chance to maybe hear the podcast version. Now, Chris, I wanted to ask you, it's already funded. Okay, the game is already funded. The goal was 500. They're well over 600,000. But I also saw there's PayPal support now for people who don't want to use the funding methods that Kickstarter uses. And when Kickstarter ends, does the PayPal funding continue, or does that end then too? Do you happen to know?
No, I think it's going to be a lot like other Kickstarter crowdsourcing campaigns have been part of, where they usually have a PayPal available after the crowdsourcing is over. But the options that you would get through Kickstarter, not all of those would be offered on PayPal. It would be drastically downscaled.
All right. Best thing to do is to support the Kickstarter if you can. And I think the lowest version or the lowest reward level where you get a digital copy of the game is around $25, if I remember right. $28, and you get the game cheaper, obviously, than you're going to get it, at retail. So check it out. I'm going to get it. I mean, it looks great, and I'm curious because I don't have a lot of Pathfinder experience, so I'm curious about getting into the Pathfinder world and seeing how it feels compared to, for example, Dragonlance or the Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk or something like that, because it's epic high fantasy, correct?
It's definitely high fantasy. I guess when I think epic, the adjectives usually break down into something else, but there is a lot going on in Kingmaker. So just for the kind of mechanics alone, but it's definitely a long, very involved campaign, and I think the new companions that got introduced, I think, will make that campaign even richer.
So I got a quick question for you. Again, this isn't 2020. I'm just curious how this stuff works. There was on the Kickstarter page, there was a breakdown of the funds allocation. And the only thing I saw, there's a level to 6% of the funds allocation. 6% is going to level design. So that's the only thing. Does that include all of the narrative work and is the level design considered the narrative, lore and plot hooks and dialogue? I'm trying to see where the writing and stuff fits into this funds allocation. You may not even know.
It's probably it probably does fit in that category. I will say that usually the construction of the art assets, even the environment art for the levels, that probably falls in the art asset category. But even at 6%, there's still a lot of writing that's going into the game. Like there's at least I think 4, if not 5 writers on it, including me. So the amount of actual lore and story and conversation interaction is pretty robust.
Okay, so if, for example, gaming is a visual media in a lot of ways. The art assets is 29%. I love here they put other 4% for meetings and heated debate. They're just being honest, folks.
Back to Philippe's question about culture shock.
Yeah.
My experience with the Russians is their heated debates, like they don't raise their voices. Like they just sort of work it out.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, if that's a heated debate, I'd hate to see like a really
like a really big fight. Right. I got you. Okay. So here's another question. I saw some of the UI mock-up and design that it looked like it was almost charting, like on a bar graph, your decisions regarding alignment. So am I right? Am I correct in understanding you choose an alignment when the game begins, but then how you behave during the game, your alignment will change despite?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the more reactive elements. The alignment does play a big part into how, things work out with your companions. It plays in the kingdom as well. It affects dialogue choices. It definitely has a range of factors that it influences.
And it uses the traditional lawful good, chaotic good, lawful evil. It uses that 9-pointed alignment compass, if you will, that players of D&D are familiar with. I like the fact that you can't just say, well, I'm chaotic good, and then you just stay chaotic good the whole game, no matter what your character does. So it kind of reminds me of, in the Old Republic games where your avatar, the visual appearance of your avatar changes to give you a hint of, are you more light side or dark side based on how you're playing. Okay, so I had another question. This is probably about, we've only got about 3 minutes. Yeah, go ahead.
Shane, do you mind if I spin off? I didn't mean to interrupt you. Actually,
no, go ahead.
The fun thing about it is not only, so like the Old Republic games obviously had the visual reactivity for the character. What's nice is in Kingmaker, not only like, you'll have visual reactivity in your kingdom too. Like people will dress in different uniforms. The feel of the kingdom will be different. You'll get different building options also based on your alignments. You're actually having your alignment sort of bleed out into your surrounding territory, which is kind of cool.
Wow, that is cool. I like that. So I'm a big fan of the alignment system in D&D or otherwise. So that appeals to me. And I know in the UI design, when they were showing possible character sheets, they were dedicating a lot of space to show you how your alignment was going. So that was very appealing to me. One final question, and then we're probably going to run out of time. Time is a predator that stalks us all our lives. I'll thank you in advance for being on. If I have to say, okay, that's it this week. You're adapting a module or a campaign. And in your own words, you admitted, you're like, what do you need me for? But then you got involved and you're like, oh, there's all this cool stuff we can do. So are you still like, now that you're elbows deep, right? What are your thoughts on the daily experience on a project adapting an adventure or an existing adventure to a CRPG? Are you still digging it, or are you kind of like, wow,
Oh, yeah, no, totally. What's interesting is it's a lot like work that I did on Alpha Protocol, which is an espionage RPG I worked on, where a lot of the characters had been set, but then you had the ability to move them around and say, hey, what should I force out of this guy? Like, what deeper involvement could this person have? Because with the adventure path, the pen and paper version, sometimes those characters only get like a paragraph or two, and then the GM's left to interpret that. Well, in the computer game, we can do our own interpretation, and that's how like even Count Make your companions, that are many of which are brand new, they add another story layer, and then the way the adventure path is set up, there's a lot of rich lore that you can keep expanding on that the adventure path, didn't have the pages to cover, but we certainly have the bandwidth to do. So we're pretty excited about that. Yeah, I'm totally digging it.
Cool. And so, it sounds like a different kind of writing challenge than maybe, some of the other stuff you've worked on, which I imagine at this point in career, that's what, you want stuff that's going to, kind of stretch you a little bit, but not as a stretch goal. Not as a stretch goal.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Chris, we got about a minute left. Is there anything, folks, remember, this Kickstarter ends Tuesday night at 11 p.m. Central. You can continue after that by PayPal, but some of the Kickstarter goodies will be gone. So go check it out. Pathfinder Kingmaker. What if somebody's never played anything to do with Pathfinder and they're dubious? I just want to do D&D. What would you tell them real quick if they were standing in front of you?
I would just jump to the webpage and go, look at these spells going off.
Well, there you go. It's like the 4th of July.
It's crazy.
All right, Chris, I hate to subject you to this, but I do the bad joke of the week on the show now. Are you ready?
Perfect.
All right. Why does a chicken coop have 2 doors?
I don't know, Shane. Why?
Because if it had 4 doors, it would be a chicken sedan. Yeah, correct response, my friend. That's it this week for Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio. Chris, thanks for being on. Good luck with Pathfinder Kingmaker, and I hope you get to make the Wire RPG after that.
Oh, and I'm the type of guy who will never settle down. Where pretty girls are, well, you know that I'm around. I kiss them and I love them, 'cause to me they're all the same. I hug them and I squeeze them, they don't even know my name. They call me the Wanderer, yeah, the Wanderer. I roam around.
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.